you're live.
All right. Well, welcome to our second speaker, author, celebrity book event we have here at CalCap Studios. My name is Ricky Borba. I am honored to be here with Mr. Randy Lerch, a Sacramento Rancho Cordova native. I only moved out here 12 years ago, so I don't even have that distinction, Randy, but welcome. Thank you for being here today.
It's great to be with everyone. Thank you, Ricky. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I'm very excited to talk about your book, which I have a copy of right here, God in the Bullpen. By the way, I'm in my daughter's bedroom. It is the best lit room in the house, and it's also the quietest. So in case everybody's wondering, like, why is that guy in a room with a pink sheet and trolls and everything? That's where I'm at today. Randy's in Shingle Springs, but we're going to have a lot of fun today going through your book, going through your life, and going through just what God put on your heart to tell people about your story, Randy. But I have a very easy softball, if you will, baseball metaphor first question for you. You grew up in Rancho Cordova. And like I said, I moved out here 12 years ago. What was Rancho like all those years ago before the industrial boom hit Sacramento?
Rancho Cordova was just kind of a mom and pop type of a community where it seemed like the families all knew each other. We had, I think, two little league fields almost, and we grew up. The kids used to run the streets together and play sports together, and it's just like everything else. It's changed so much over the years, Ricky.
If I understand correctly, Rancho Cordova wasn't even Rancho Cordova. It was like a city proper or something like that. What was it called that back then?
I grew up in Rancho Cordova, yes,
okay.
And I went to Cordova High. My middle school or junior high was Mills Junior High, but it was always Rancho Cordova from the time I can remember.
Okay, yeah, because I remember going into a meeting and they said it became incorporated. I don't know what all that means. I in my head when I was reading your book, I was imagining a lot of flat land, wheat fields, grass, things like that. So, all right, so Randy, we're gonna start talking about your book now. There's a lot of great stuff in here. Unfortunately, we won't even have time if we had 6 hours to get into everything. But I've got some questions I wanted to ask first, right off the bat, which we'll go right to your high school playing days. Were you personally surprised going from high school to single A and not the developmental league, or did you kind of know that you were special back there and being so tall and left-handed?
I knew I could play the game, and I knew I liked the game of baseball a lot, and I used to, like I said in my book, I used to brag to everyone, hey, I'm going to get drafted and I'm going to be in the big leagues and all that stuff. I was a cocky kid. I think everybody wanted to slap me, but my dream was to play in the big leagues. But when I was drafted and first started in the minor leagues, I was really, really surprised what a difference it was. Being a kid out of high school, I was a real good hitting pitcher. I was, a hitter, pitcher, like all kids that are good athletes on your high school team. I got to play every day. And then when I was drafted, I found out in a real big hurry that after Eddie Bachman told me I was going to be a pitcher and pitcher only, that I was going to be sitting the bench every 4 out of 5 days, and I was going to only play 1 day a week, and that was a huge surprise to me and a major disappointment. So it was a lot to get used to.
Well, not only was that a surprise, but you tell a story in your book when you got off the plane and you were expecting someone to pick you up, and you made a phone call like, "Oh yeah, just get yourself to the hotel across the street." You're like, "Wait, I'm a 17-year-old high school student. How do you do that?"
No kidding, right? I was 17 years old and never been on an airplane before, let alone across country where my Class A team was in Auburn, New York. And I remember looking out the plane, out the window of the plane and seeing Mommy there waving goodbye to me. And I remember, I thought I was going to hold up good, and the tears started running down my cheeks. And my first experience of saying goodbye to Mommy, and then after being 5 hours on the plane and waiting and looking around the airport for someone to pick me up, thank goodness they gave me a number to call just in case. And remember, there wasn't cell phones in those
Right,
days, and so I had to thank God my dad. Yeah, my dad gave me some change to for the phone if I needed it, and I had the number, called the number. They said, "Oops, I forgot. We forgot to pick you up. You need to go across the street and check into this hotel." I said, "What?" He said, "Well, we have an account there. Just go over there and tell them that you're going to be playing, for the Auburn Phillies." And so I went over there and had my second big cry after I sat on the bed at 17 years old and said, where am I? What am I going to do next?
Yeah, not a very grand introduction into Major League Baseball. You get off the plane, they forget about you. You got to walk across the street to the hotel. So, Randy, your book is a lot of your testimony and a lot of baseball stories. So one of the things I noticed in your book was you have quite a bit of Yogi Berra's comments in your book. What is your fascination? What is your draw? What is it about Yogi Berra that you like so much?
The Yogi Berra comments came from the co-author Harold Lerch, who no relation, Harold Lerch came to me, who was a big Phillies fan after I made the team, and since he was had the same last name, and they were big Phillies fan, especially they were a Randy Lerch fan after that, and so Harold Lerch said, "Hey, how about write this book and let's call it God in the Bullpen?" And I says, "Okay, let's give it a shot." And I did that after my diagnosis of cirrhosis. I had been approached by him before to write a book, and I declined because I felt like, look I'm not Mickey Mantle or anybody like that, so nobody's going to read it. But after being diagnosed with my cirrhosis, I agreed with Harold to write the book, and he said, "Well, I'd like to interject some stuff about Yogi Berra and stuff like that in between your stories." And I said, "You know what? That sounds great. Go for it."
Really fits. That's Harold. It really adds a lot to it. I really liked it. Those are very humorous, very, very humorous. So we're going to skip ahead in terms of your life a little bit. We're going to go right past the minors, go right to the major leagues. My first question is, and we will talk more about the greenies, the amphetamines more in detail, but my first question is, after having taken one for the very first time in your entire life, you go out and you give up 3 consecutive home runs. Why continue to take them after that was your experience with them? What was the thought process behind that?
That is a great question. The thought process is I was always someone that got super nervous when before I would pitch a game, and I hated that feeling. And when I was offered the greenies, I was actually 5-2 my first major league season. I just come off a win against the Los Angeles Dodgers with Dusty Baker and Ron Say, Steve Garvey, Reggie Smith,
no slouches
all those
there.
guys, and no slouches there. And so I was 5-2, went into Houston and had a very a veteran player that I looked up to. Said, "Well, you know what? These things have worked for me all these years, and you're not going to make it through all the long season, as tired as you get if you don't take these." And to answer your question, Ricky, is that when I took them, that terrible feeling of anxiety and nervousness went away.
Okay.
And even though I had a bad game, I loved that feeling of invincibility.
Yeah.
And then I liked the feeling of the drinking afterwards to try to go to sleep. And, it just snowballed. And boy, it was one of probably the biggest mistake I ever made.
Well, like I said, we're going to get more into that, but it is something that followed you for your whole career. But before we get there, I want to know if obviously you were retired at this point, but one of the things that I read your book was I feel very strongly that you are very similar to Randy Johnson. Did you ever feel that way too when you watched him pitch, that could have perhaps been your same career had you not been derailed from the greenies and the alcohol?
I had people say that my wind-up and stuff was a lot like him, and tall and thin. He was 2 or 3 inches taller than me, even though I'm 6'5". I think Randy's 6'8" or something like that. But I never want to say that I was going to be as good as Randy Johnson, but I know for sure that me taking the greenies and drinking like I did definitely took away from my career.
Yeah. I also found it interesting, personally for me, reading your book. I don't know if anybody watching knows this about me, but I'm a film director, and I directed a film last year in Rocky Mountain, Virginia. So I'm reading your book, and I'm like, oh, I've been there. I directed a film there. It'll be in theaters this July, but I felt it was a very small
Wow.
world that you were affiliated with Rocky Mountain as well.
That was another stop along the way. I started in Auburn, New York, and won 9 games, lost 2 my rookie year, and even though they took the hitting away from me, I did get some. I did hit over 300 that year, and got to pinch hit a little bit, and then my next stop was Rocky Mount, and that was higher A ball. As you go from one minor league city to the next, as you were talking about Rancho Cordova, it was everybody knew each other. It was a mom and pa thing. The fans, the fans, along with the people that lived there, they were like your kid, and they'd invite you over to dinner, and you would you got to know everybody in the town, and so the next stop was Rocky Mount, and then from there I went to AA in Reading, Pennsylvania.
There you go. So Randy, I'm a little worried about you. I'm wondering, do I need to teach you about pressure cookers right now, or have you grasped that yet?
Holy cow. I had, that's a great story. And while I was in Rocky Mountain, it seemed like, holy cow, not only was I a newlywed at the time, I had my wife at the time, Janet, was we had all of our wedding gifts and stuff like that, and we put everything we could in a tiny trailer that we bought from Sears that we were towing with a TR6, a little sports car.
Yeah.
And one of the things we brought along as a wedding gift was one of those old-time pressure cookers that it might have had directions, but I sure didn't know how to follow them. And I thought, well, let's cook this. Let's cook these potatoes up. Let's make some potatoes. And I remember getting this thing, and it wasn't making enough noise and stuff like that. And I thought, well, something's wrong. And I took that thing to go whatever that thing was. I took that off, and then nothing really happened. I said, well, Janet, this thing must not be working. And I shoved the handles open, and the thing exploded, and it exploded all over me, and I got 2nd and 3rd degree burns all over the front of me. Ended up to the hospital, and I think I missed a start or 2. I was all bandaged up. So, welcome to the minor leagues.
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky you didn't die. Those things can be lethal and kill people. The fact that you got 2nd and 3rd degree burns and didn't die. As I was reading your book, I was like, this guy's got like 9 lives, like a cat. I think you've got 9 lives. I'm wearing my A's jersey. I'm a huge Oakland A's fan. I've been following baseball my whole life. I'm smart enough about baseball to know that in today's game, you have very specific roles for pitchers. Some guys even only come in for 1 out or 1 batter, even if they get the out or not. And so when I read that you pitched 14 innings, before we get to what I want, because I'm going to surprise people, but just don't spoil it by saying what happened after that. But just talk about the taxation on your body after 14 innings.
After 14 innings, I didn't know it at the time, but the first day isn't as bad. But then the second day, like anybody that goes and works out, after you work out, you're a little bit sore. But then that next day, I call it rigor mortis. Rigor mortis sets in, and you can't hardly move. And I remember telling one of my teammates, I was looking around to see what truck ran me over. Where was that truck? To see if there was any tread marks on my back. Yes, it was amazing. It was in a playoff game. It was in AA, and I was pitching against, I think it was against a Bristol team. They had Butch Hobson and a lot of the great Red Sox players, and it went in, I think, 1-1, and as I was pitching, I was actually getting a lot of ground ball outs, the good sinker, and I had Dallas Green in the. Dallas Green was he ended up being the Phillies world champion manager at the time, but at the time he was a farm director, and it was the very last game of the season, and he was in the stands and he watched me pitch, and I was 20 years old. And after the game, he said, "Hey kid, you pitched pretty good today. We're going to try to bring you up at the end of the season and give you a big league uniform." And my mouth, I just was gasping for air because it was the last thing I expected. I thought I was going home.
Yeah, of course you did. So there it is. It's right there. You just said it. After your 14-inning game, you go to the big leagues. And I don't know the timeline, but I know that your first game was at Wrigley Field. And what happened then, Randy?
My first game in Wrigley Field, I didn't know anything about Wrigley. Later in my career, I would find out all about Wrigley Field. But,
yeah.
I tell about it in the book. Here's this kid with, these great big old eyes just staring at Wrigley Field as I'm sitting here on
22?
At that time, I was 20.
20, okay.
I was 20 years old, and here I am in Wrigley Field. And I thought, well, I'm just here just to kind of take in the atmosphere. And, you could hear the vendor out there, peanuts, popcorn, Cracker Jacks, beer, all that, hot dogs, all that stuff. And, then I had the Topps bubblegum man, the guy that takes the pictures for your first bubblegum card. And I was just taking it all in. And the dugout, or the bullpen, is right alongside right field when you're playing in the Cubs. And so I'm sitting down there, and the phone rings, and I didn't think nothing of it. And all of a sudden, let me back up. Steve Carlton was pitching that day, and it was later in the game, and he was winning like 13-2. He was on his way to another Cy Young award. Yeah. And the phone rings. I wasn't a reliever. I'd never been a reliever, and all of a sudden, Danny Ozark tells the bullpen coach, "Get Lerch up." Yeah. And he says, "Lerch, Randy, you're pitching. Get warmed up." I go, "Huh?" I go, "No. There's got to be a mistake." And he says, No, you got the next inning. You're gonna finish up the game. Pitch the ninth for Carlton. We got this we got this game in the bag. So
yeah, they thought.
The famous wind blowing out in Wrigley Field, and I warm up. I go in. Man, I was so nervous. I don't think I've ever, and I didn't have my greenies in me yet either.
Yeah, right.
So so I ended up pitching, going out and pitching. I think I gave up a single to Jose Cardinal. Manny Trio looped one to right field. I might have walked somebody. Anyway, the bases were loaded, and Tim Hosley came up, and he hit what I thought was a routine fly ball to left field, but that ball just kept blowing and blowing and blowing. And if anybody knows Wrigley Field, it has those baskets that kind of in left field around the left and right field fences, and it just barely tipped into the basket and rolled in for a grand slam. And it was like, welcome to the big leagues, kid.
You give up 4 runs in your first big league appearance, not start. But to be fair, things did get a little better from there. Your first complete major league season was 1977, the year I was born, by the way, just to make you feel old. And
thanks.
Yeah, you went 10-6. I'm looking back at my notes here. You went 10-6 in your big year. That's amazing. But that's also when you started taking these greenies, these amphetamines. And so now I want to talk a little bit more about those. What are they? You said a little bit, they made me feel invincible. What do they do? And then my question, I have a lot of questions, but another question I have regarding them is, as a pitcher, you're taking one every 5 days because you're only pitching every 5 days or so. Does that mean that position players were taking those things 162 games a year? So you can talk about all that now.
Okay, well, some of the players did take it. Not everybody did, and that was something that was everyone had their own plan, I should say, how they did it. But as far as I was concerned, when I first started taking greenies, and even though I was 5-2, I was doing very well. I gave up the 3 home runs, and not too long after that, I had 10 no decisions in a row. It seemed like if I pitched good, I would go into later innings. But if I pitched bad, I got lit up early, and it really jacked my earned run average up. And I was at the point then where, when I took the greenies, I got to the point where I got addicted to them. And I didn't think I could pitch without them. So there's just a tremendous amount of pressure that you feel, especially with pitching when you're pitching with the Philadelphia Phillies, and you had a team that just, you had Hall of Famers on that team. You had Steve Carlton, Mike Schmidt, great shortstop Larry Boa, Manny Trio. I think he was there then, or Ted Sizemore. But at that point, there was a lot of pressure to pitch, and I just kept taking them, and it was to a major detriment to my whole career.
And you said they made you invincible. I've done plenty of stupid things in my life, so I'm not trying to sound like I'm better than anybody. I've never done drugs, thank God. So what is the come down like off of them?
Well, that's the problem. There isn't any come down until the drug totally gets out of your system, and then you've stayed up probably all night long. What it does, it's a speed. It's an amphetamine. It's not. I wouldn't compare it to cocaine, but it's not as strong, but it's in pill form, and you take it, and it hypes you up and makes you feel. Like if a guy's in the bar, I guess like he has beer muscles or something like that. Yeah. You just feel invincible, and you take those, and you go out there, and a lot of times I didn't pitch well, and then what do? You go to the bar and you start drinking, and you drink them until 2-3 o'clock in the morning until you can go to sleep that night, and wow. And the process just starts, just keep going over and over again. And it did for many, many years in my career.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because your first season was 1977. And in your book, you say your darkest moments were in 1978. Although after reading your book, I'm like, I don't know. You had some pretty dark moments after that. But in 1978, you accepted the Lord. And I would love for you to talk about that a little bit and how that came to be. And then there's something very specific I want to talk about that in regards to your faith.
Okay, great. I accepted the Lord in 1978, and it was because of the pressures. I just didn't know what to do, and I was raised. My mom was a Christian lady, and I had a religious background, the way that I was raised, and I remember that the way I've always felt that the Lord has always been deep in my heart, and I didn't know where to turn. I would pitch good during that 10-game span, and I'd pitch good, and I would get a no decision. I'd pitch bad, somebody would hit a home run, and I'd get a no decision. So I was just playing that roller coaster ride, and as a young kid of let's see, I was 23 years old then, and as a young kid, I didn't have any mentors at the time, and I was somebody that I was raised, don't go and, don't show your weaknesses and stuff like that. So I wasn't anybody that went out and tried to ask for help, and the only way that I knew what to do, that Mom always said, is, you can always trust Jesus. And so what I did is I was in my hotel room, and I just started talking to God, and I asked him, please, come and live with me, come and live in my heart. And the problem was once I did that, most of the time you have people that know about God and know about the Lord that are around you, and I didn't know where to take it from there. So it was a quick fix, Ricky, but it was also something that I still had, as you read my book, I still had a long ways to go. God had a lot of work he needed to do with me.
As he will until we're done, the Bible says, where he's going to complete the good work. So that was one of the main things, and I think probably the most significant thing in your book, in my opinion, that you wrote, was your faith was a private, secret thing you kept from people. So
yes.
Not only did you not have a mentor, but you didn't even tell anybody that you accepted the Lord. So no chaplain, no pastor, nobody on the team that was maybe a Christian even knew about it. You kept it to yourself. And just to kind of relate it to this story I heard once when I was in Bible college was my teacher as a young man was given a glow-in-the-dark cross. And his parents gave him this glow-in-the-dark cross, and he was so excited to have it. And he put it in his pocket all day, and he played with his friends and stuff like that. Then he got home and he took it out of his pocket and he went in his dark room and he took the cross out and nothing. It didn't glow. And he started thinking, well, what the heck? How come it didn't glow? Well, it turns out that cross needed to be outside and shown to the light shown to people in order for it to charge, if you will. And what he kind of relayed to us was that if you keep your faith
Oh, I love
private,
that.
it's going to dwindle. It's going to be dark. It's not going to be this bright thing. So we have to tell people. So if you want to talk about that just a little bit, about how important it is to tell people about your faith, because Randy, you were on an island and you did not do well after you accepted the Lord. Things did not go very good because God's not a magic switch.
God's not a magic switch, and I wasn't, when I accepted the Lord, I thought that it was a magic switch.
Yeah,
And
of course.
what I did was I accepted the Lord, but I also didn't accept the fact that I wasn't going to be able to take my greenies and go party anymore, right? So I accepted the Lord, but that was on my terms, not the Lord's terms, right?
Yeah.
And so after I accepted him, when it came time to take my greenie and then go party after the game, I left the Lord at the clubhouse. I said, left him there, and then after I was a bad boy and came back and the next day being all hungover and stuff, I said, oh Lord, what did I do to myself now?
Yeah.
And that just went on for years until I hit the bottom where God said, man, I'm tired of this stuff.
well, like me, you and I have both hit many bottoms. One of the bottoms I would like to talk about, to be very have a good segue, is Tug McGraw and the Montezuma's revenge story. If you want to tell that story, speaking of bottoms.
I love that story. Tug McGraw, just even to go back, my first meeting of Tug McGraw was in spring training, and I didn't know who this guy was. And Tug decided he was going to give all the rookies, which was me in spring training, and I should even back up even more, a left-handed rookie, which he was a left-handed veteran player, and he was in his first spring training with the Phillies after winning the World Series with, I believe, the '69 Mets, and he started giving me a hard time. He says, hey, kid, he says, I'm left-handed. And I says, I know. He goes, well, you're not getting my job.
Right.
And then after that, he became my mentor, and we started having a lot of fun together. But he invited me to go on a Jerry Lewis bike-a-thon bike trip. And that was for muscular dystrophy. And so Steve Carlson, Roman Gabriel, Ben Davidson, John Montefusco, Larry Christensen, a lot of us went. We rode bikes from Seattle, Washington to San Diego, California. And
wow. We
tried to ride it 100 miles a day. And then we would have a fundraiser at each spot. And I had just finished my first Major League season. Matter of fact, it was my second. It was in 1978. So that's after I hit the 2 home runs, and I had a little bit of notoriety, and my Knights of Columbus, my Christian Catholic youth organization, everything wanted to invite me on the way to Rancho Cordova to speak in front of their organization youth and everything at their banquet, and so I was really nervous, and Tug was ahead of this muscular dystrophy thing, and so he had invited me. He said, "Hey, Tug, I called him Toogie. Hey, Toogie, I says, would you come with me over there? I'm really nervous about this. I've never spoken in front of anyone, and now I'm going to be speaking in front of my hometown folks.
Yeah.
So maybe you come, and you're from, I think he was from Fairfield or Vacaville or something like that. So he was a California boy, and so I talked him into it. We ended up catching a plane almost in time to get there. We didn't bring any. We brought no change of clothes, nothing like that. And Tug and I spoke at the event, and I said, Tug, how do you speak to these people? I'm so nervous, man. How am I going to do this? He says, well, I got the great cure for you. He says, and this is before the Montezuma's revenge, and he says, I got the great cure for you. He says, he goes, you just have to go out there and put everyone in a vulnerable position and just pretend like everyone is just sitting on the toilet out there. And I said, you got to be kidding me, man. So, right there I knew where Tug was all coming from. And so that night we went out with my parents to have some drinks, and then Tug and I decided to stay and close the bar and stuff like that. And then we were all hungover the next day, and Tug, we went and had breakfast with my dad and his buddy, And after breakfast, which was right across the restaurant was right across the street from the hotel, Tug and I just got in late enough just to quickly get a couple hours of sleep, go meet Dad for breakfast. And my dad is not anybody my dad's gone. He's been gone for a year now, but he was somebody, you know, a great athlete. He loved the players and stuff like that, but he wasn't anybody that had, you know, we always laughed about his sense of humor and stuff. He didn't like to show when he was laughing really hard. So we ended up going and Tug McGraw we got done with breakfast, and Tug McGraw on the way to the airport ends up getting the Montezuma's Revenge. And as we're driving, you hear Tug scream, "Stop the car! Stop the blankety blank car!" And my dad didn't know what it was. We were in stop and go traffic on the way to the airport. We were on Highway 50 in the Rancho Cordova area.
Yeah.
So my dad pulls over to the middle of the road, and all of a sudden Tug just slams the door open, and he goes and it leans up against the chain link fence and lets her fly, and that's the hardest I've ever seen my dad laugh.
Really?
And,
so your dad broke, huh?
Yeah, he let her fly, grabbed a wet newspaper in the chain link fence, and got back in the car and says, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah.
So we went and caught a plane and went and got back on the bikes again. But it was Tug McGraw. That's as low as it gets for old Tug.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna. Hopefully, this is a very clever segue. So we go from that story about Montezuma's Revenge to your 1980 season, which is Montezuma's Revenge. It's not a very good season for you in terms of stats, but after the season, you find out the FBI is investigating the Phillies organization for what, Randy?
For the greenies that I had been taking.
Yeah.
And it was the Drug Enforcement Agency, and lo and behold, my teammates were getting the amphetamines from a Reading, Pennsylvania doctor where they had played when they were in the minor leagues, and they ordered their greenies there, a few of them, and lo and behold, one of my teammates ordered them for me. I wasn't even there. He put my name on a prescription, and they were delivered to me at the clubhouse. Since I was going to pitch the next day, I didn't make that trip, and I ended up accepting the pills after I was told, "Oh, I ordered those for you," and my name got put on the prescription. The case was turned over to the DEA or to the prosecution in Pennsylvania. They did a preliminary trial where I was the guy that got up there and told the truth, and they threw the case out, and it ended up putting a big damper on my career.
Well, you very bird's eye viewed it. There's more to the story. Number one, that season you didn't have a very good season, and the Phillies won the World Series. So you went out, I believe, 2 or 3 days before the end of the season and tried pitching your guts out. It didn't go well, and the manager, who wasn't a huge fan of yours, walked right past you, and I believe it was the equipment manager or somebody like that, the general manager, walked up, and what did they tell you about the World Series roster?
Yeah, it was Herm Strutt, the pitching coach, and he told me that I wasn't going to be on the roster, and that's where Tug McGraw came in, where I walked over to Tug and told him what was going on, and he told me, he says, "Oh man, they told me that well, you're not going to be on the roster, but you can make the road trips and stuff like that, or go to the playoffs, but you can just watch." And no one explained anything to me what was going on, so I just told him, I says, "No, you can basically forget about me making these trips with you," and they left me off the roster, and it was one of the toughest things I'd ever gone through. Especially after going through, I hadn't gone through the drug thing yet, but I got let's see, the drug thing came out, but then we hadn't gone to trial until after I was left off the roster, right. I believe, and then I got in the wintertime, I had the trial waiting for me, and then after that, you'll probably ask, I got traded.
Yeah, so that was kind of my thing, was that you had a very tumultuous few months there. So you You get left off the World Series roster, which in today's vernacular left you butthurt. You did end up going to a couple of the World Series games, though, but we'll get to that in a second. Then you go to the FBI investigating, and then you go to the trial. But while you were sitting at one of the World Series games, somebody came up to you and kind of spoke some peace into your heart. Tell me about that.
When I was probably every other Sunday or every third Sunday after I got myself in trouble, I would go to the Sunday chapel when we were at home, and one of the speakers that spoke at the chapel was a man, I forget his name, but he was someone that you knew, and you probably know, Ricky, when someone walks in, he definitely you feel God's presence.
Yeah.
I felt his spirit. I felt God's spirit working with him, and he was a guy that really got my attention, and he spoke at the chapel services that I did attend. And when I was the night that the Phillies clinched the World Series, as I was sitting in the stands in Philadelphia, just heartbroken. And this same man out of the blue walked up to me and told me, "Randy, I just want you to know that," and he knew that, all the stuff to the papers and stuff like that I'd gone through. And he just felt my pain. And he says, "I just want you to know that you deserve to be out on that field just as much as anybody else." And by him saying that, and me feeling God's presence, it really, really lifted me up and brought me out of that spot.
And that's great, because that's going to lead me to my next kind of thought about all this, was that from there, you go to this trial, which you are, if I remember correctly, not eating, not sleeping. It's kind of keeping you up at night type deal. And you feel like the truth will set you free was this verse that was playing over and over in your mind. Talk about the trial and talk about what you did that blew everybody's mind, that could have backfired but didn't, regarding the trial.
Well, I had a few teammates that had already gone up there, and what it was is, just to give a little bit of background that I didn't. The trial, the amphetamines, the prescriptions were written by a team doctor that had been in Reading for many, many years. He was a team doctor, and his players came through the AA affiliate on the way to the big leagues. They knew this doctor, so the doctor knew these guys. He had examined them, so. When they had asked for a little pep me up, or they were tired as the season was going on, he wrote these prescriptions, and so their names were on the prescriptions he wrote. So that's why they brought this to trial, and they weren't gonna put the players weren't having a chance to go to jail. It was the doctor. The doctor, they were bringing him charges on him because they felt like he was selling drugs on the street, or he was doing something illegal. So what they did is he was up for trial. It was a pre-trial, and when I was called after some of my other teammates had testified, when I got on the witness stand, of course, never been in a courtroom before in my life, and just scared to death. Yeah. I looked up, and here's the doctor in the front row, only maybe 5 feet from me, staring at me, and I just couldn't believe it. And I thought, my goodness, I said, this poor man is only, all he did was try to do what he thought was right by helping the players out. And now they were going to, they said they didn't even know him, and so. I told him, yes, I did accept. I didn't tell the story of how and why I accepted him and all that stuff. But I did accept him, and that I knew him, and they threw the case out. And of course, after my career, they always thought that if I had things going on, that I was always a druggie.
Mm. But the moral of that story is that the truth actually set him free and set you free, because had you gone up there earlier in the book, you talked about one of the players had a lawyer and none of you could afford a lawyer, didn't have time or whatever it was. But that lawyer gathered all of you together and said, spend the next amount of time in this room getting your story straight, which basically meant figure out whatever lie you need to figure out to make all your stories cohesive. And that didn't sit right with you. So you get up on trial, you tell the absolute truth, and they throw the case out. And so that's the moral of the story, if I got that correct.
That's the moral of the story, Ricky. You got it.
Okay. All right, Randy, I've got a trivia question for you, okay? Who is the first starting pitcher?
Go ahead, buddy.
What's that?
Go ahead. I'm ready.
Okay. Who's the first starting pitcher to get a win for the Brewers organization in playoff history?
That'd be me.
That's Randy Lerch.
I was the starting pitcher. Pitched 6 1/3 innings, and ended up I didn't get the W by my name, but we won that game, and it was the first playoff win in Brewers history, and in Yankee Stadium against Reggie Jackson and the boys.
Yeah, that was incredible. I have a question for you. Someone wrote in. Okay, it says, "Hello,
Okay.
Randy. My copy of your terrific book is marked up with notes, underlining, and sticky notes for personal reminders, but also for struggling patients under my care. My question is, if you could talk with that younger version of yourself, what might you say?"
What a great question. The younger version of myself was to just, like my dad always said, when I remember but the day that my dad, on the way to the airport, he said, "Son, if I can give you some advice," he says, there's a lot of bad advice out there. There's a lot of people that are, going to could steer you the wrong way, and there's a lot of people that can steer you the right way. Take what you can use to benefit yourself, to better yourself, and put that other stuff and get rid of it. And I wish I'd have got rid of it.
So that's great advice for your younger self, and also great advice for anybody struggling with addiction as you were. I kind of jumped ahead. I mean, you started the 1981 season with the Phillies, and I think you said it was 3 days into spring training you get traded to the Brewers. And then you have the 1982 season, which it was kind of a mediocre season, if I remember correctly.
That I was very inconsistent the 1982 season, and I was my whole career, Ricky. I was a 500 pitcher. If I was good, I was really good. And if I was bad, I was really bad. And not only were the Phillies a great team, the Milwaukee Brewers, the 81 and 82 teams that I played on, I mean, my goodness, you had Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, Cecil Cooper, Ted Simmons, who just made the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
It goes on. And so it was a great team. And they scored a lot of runs, and it seemed like when I was pitching good, they didn't score many runs, and we would win. But then, the days that I should have won when they scored a lot of runs, I would give up more than the other team did, and so they got tired of my inconsistency. But you know what? They also had a chance to get Don Sutton, so
there you go.
They took that chance.
Well, after the 1982 season, as if the drinking and the greenies weren't enough, your high school friend came to your house and offered you what?
Cocaine.
Yeah. And how did that go?
Well, it didn't go well because I still like that feeling of that hyped up feeling. I for a better word, I felt, that invincibility feeling, and I tried that. I was scared. I remember how scared I was of doing that, but. He said, "Hey, man, this will be fun. You're not going to, just one time, that kind of stuff, And so I tried that, and I liked it way too much. And it was just like, it was my greenies on steroids. And so I used way too much of that, my friend."
Well, throughout your book, in the later chapters, the middle chapters, you have in capital letters, "God is good," probably, 100 times. So here's Randy in 1982 doing cocaine, drinking greenies, not paying attention, inconsistent in his baseball. Yet here's God, loves you, never stops thinking about you. You're his favorite person on earth, is always trying to better your life. And so he provides a way for you to play for the hometown Giants. And off you go to the Giants for 2 seasons.
That was my high school dream. That was not high school. That was the time I was a child. I remember at night. You get put to bed. Now the kids listening in won't know what a transistor radio is. I had my little transistor radio, and I listened to the Giants, and we, with Willie Mays and Willie McCovey and Davenport and all those great players. I wanted to be just like Juan Marichal. I wanted to be just like them, and so I would listen to those games, and that was my dream. And I was actually disappointed when I was drafted by the Phillies, because I wanted to go play for the Giants. As soon as you get drafted, you're going to play with the team that you want to play with, right? Yeah. Well, that's not the way it worked. But as a kid, my grandfather used to take me at probably 12 years old, something like that, to Candlestick Park and watch those guys play. And I ended up at the end of my career being able to play for a couple of years with the Giants. I pitched really well one year, and I actually one of my idols was Willie McCovey, and Willie was still playing real well when I in my younger years with the Phillies, and I got to pitch against Willie McCovey, and I struck him out a few times in one game against my parents. And I would tell the story that Willie McCovey got so mad, I think, that I did that in San Francisco against Willie, against a lot of the hometown fans, and they come to watch the game or from my hometown, and so I think I ticked Willie off a little bit, because when he came into Philadelphia, he hit a 3-run home run off of me. But my claim to fame is I got to pitch against Willie McCovey, and I know I'm aging people here, or aging myself, I should say. But with McCovey and I had to pitch against Jesus the Alou brothers and Bobby Bonds and stuff like that. So in a way, I got to fulfill my childhood dream.
It's an incredible story. It's an incredible journey. I love the fact that you were at least aware the whole time that God was with you and providing all these opportunities for you. I want to skip ahead a little bit. So now you're Giants. You go to Portland. You go back to Philadelphia. I think you were drunk the entire time this was happening. In the course of 2 years. So you're done playing now. You're trying to figure out what exactly do you want to do. And I don't know whose quote-unquote bright idea it was, but you decided to open a sports bar called Smokehouse 1898, and you were going to be the Sam from Cheers. How did that go?
Well, you put an alcoholic behind the bar, that's not a good sign right there, So, and then when you put an alcoholic that a part owner of the thing, and then you put him behind the bar and he's hungover, and so to get it, so he opens up the place, and the first place he heads is to the bar. Yeah. And it was a beautiful restaurant. My dad was a great cook. I don't believe that my drinking, was the reason that we didn't make it, but our restaurant in Placerville, California, was kind of a fine dining restaurant, and our restaurant was a little bit before its time. The problem is I can always, unless some people out there have success, don't go in business with your family, as they always say, because, that was a horrible experience when our family, when the restaurant went broke, and I went my way, and of course, just this at the same time, I pitched my last my last professional baseball. I had I was going to start my family. My wife wanted a divorce, and I can't blame her. And then on top of it, the restaurant was going under, and I didn't know what to do with myself. My career was over, and so guess what? I medicated myself with the alcohol and the drugs, and then that's when the addiction turned it up like 10 notches.
Before we get there, though, I want to bring us back a little bit, because during that time you had one special friend that never gave up on you, that always was there for you. That was Tug. Talk about Tug a little bit more as your friend. I know he passed away, I believe, in 2004. And I don't remember that being covered in your book, but just talk about the fact that you did at least have someone in your life that didn't judge you, that was always there for you.
Tug was always Tug was always my mentor. The time that I went to him when I was the big time that I looked up to him and got some, some, I guess, some serenity when I was taken off the World Series roster, and Tug told me, he gave me some good advice, and then so I looked up to him, and things worked out after I went to the Brewers, and I pitched real good games there, and then we had kept in touch, and so Tug McGraw, like I said, we kept in touch. And then when I got in so much trouble after the restaurant closed, I just didn't know where to go. I was pretty much homeless. I had no money. I had hawked everything that I had, anything to get the alcohol, and
including
just to get a little bit of. I hawked my Jesus cross, and my picture of Jesus, my gold chain, to get some drugs, and I was going to die. I literally was going to die if I didn't get some help. So I called Tug,
and he was there for you, and he brings you back.
He was there. Yeah, go ahead.
And he brings you back, and we have the gas station incident.
Yeah. Well, what I did is I didn't know where to go, and I thought, the restaurant didn't work. I have no college education, no education whatsoever. I was lost. I was going to die. I found out later that I was just days away from being arrested for use and all that stuff, and then so I called Tug, and I thought, well, if I could just get back to Philadelphia where people know me, and maybe I could get a job there, because again, I had no college education, and Tug was having his own problems that I didn't know about at the time, but the next day was a ticket wait for me at the airport, and so I jumped on a plane, and Tug put me up at his place, and through him and Larry Christensen got me a job.
Yeah, they did. And you go to a gas station because I believe you're on your way to an autograph signing or a charity baseball game or something. And what happened at the gas station?
Well, this is so after that point, I don't know if you're going to bring up getting eaten up by the dog and all that stuff, but there
were so many things to pull from that were negative. I thought, let's just stick with the
But okay. Yeah. Well, this is a funny one because we jumped over that other stuff that almost killed me. But right. I was a walking dead man, right?
Yeah.
This is after I had been working construction for quite a while, and I still had a lot of bad feelings. I was living in New Jersey. I was living in Absecon, New Jersey. I was doing construction.